Today, we are diving into a disturbing true case that features gruesome suffering. This is so unbelievable that you might think it belongs in a movie script rather than reality. But tragically, it is 100% true. This isn't your typical murder story. It involves multiple tragedies intertwined in a nearly unbelievable fashion. On May 19th, 1966, Gertrude Baniszewski and four teenagers, two of Baniszewski's children and two neighbors, were found guilty in perhaps the most shocking and horrifying murder in the city's history: the murder of a 16-year-old girl, Sylvia Likens. The torture and murder of Sylvia Likens is considered Indiana's worst crime and one of the most disturbing incidents in the history, as described by a senior Indianapolis investigator. He claimed this case as the most sadistic case he encountered in 35 years of his experience. I will explain to you this tragic, spine-nerving case and its severity, so stick till the end.
Welcome to Monday Fiction.
A 16-year-old girl, Sylvia, came from a large poor family from southern Boone County, just northwest of Indianapolis. Her father, Lester Likens, had only an 8th grade education and worked a lot of different jobs to make a living. He had a laundry route, worked in factories, and had even owned a small restaurant, though unsuccessfully. He had also traveled with Carnival selling food from a concession cart, and it was to this work to which he and his wife decided to return in the summer of 1965. That meant finding someone to watch 4 of their children. The oldest, Diana, was grown and married. The 2 boys, Danny and Benny, were placed with their grandparents, and that left the girls, Sylvia and Jenny. Jenny was shy, insecure, and limped from childhood polio. On the other hand, Sylvia was outwardly more confident and went by the name Cookie. In July 1965, Paula Baniszewski met 16-year-old Sylvia Likens and her younger sister Jenny, just a year younger than Sylvia, who needed leg braces due to polio. After spending time together, Paula invited them to stay the night at her home. The girl's mother, Betty, was in jail for shoplifting, leaving Sylvia to care for Jenny. The next day, their father, Lester, arrived and met Gertrude Baniszewski, who introduced herself as Mrs. Wright. They discussed Gertrude taking in Sylvia and Jenny as boarders for $20 a week while Lester traveled for work. Lester didn't inspect the house, which was filthy, lacked basic kitchen appliances, and had only limited food and sleeping space. Gertrude promised Lester that she would look after Sylvia and Jenny as if they were her own children until his return. Gertrude was already caring for 7 of her own children: Paula, John, Stephanie, Mary, Shirley, and James and Dennis, who were just 18 months old. Gertrude Baniszewski was born in Indianapolis, Indiana, as third of 6 children. She did not have a great past. At 16, she dropped out of high school to marry John Baniszewski, with whom she had 4 children. After 10 tumultuous years, marked by John's volatile temper, they divorced. Gertrude briefly remarried, then reconciled with John, having 2 more children before divorcing again in 1963. After her third failed relationship, Gertrude had a son with a 20-year-old named Dennis Wright, who also abused her before abandoning her shortly after the birth of their child. By 1965, she lived alone with her 7 children in poverty. Gertrude, a chain smoker, asthmatic, and clinically depressed due to her failed relationship, relied on sporadic financial support from her first husband and took on odd jobs to make the ends meet. She resided in Indianapolis in a home she rented for $55 a month. Although Lester Likens agreed to pay Gertrude Baniszewski $20 a week to care for his daughters, the payments often arrived late. In frustration, Gertrude began beating Sylvia and Jenny with a wooden paddle, saying things like, "I took care of you two for nothing." In one incident in late August, both girls were beaten after being accused of eating too much at a church supper. By mid-August, Gertrude's abuse focused mostly on Sylvia, likely due to jealousy of her youth and appearance. The abuse escalated to beatings, starvation, and forcing Sylvia to eat spoiled food from the garbage. On one occasion, Sylvia was wrongly accused of stealing candy that she bought. In late August, Sylvia mentioned having a boyfriend in California, which led Gertie to ask if she had done something with the boy. Sylvia, unsure of the question, mentioned going skating and to the park with boys. When she added that she had once lain under the covers with her boyfriend, Gertrude accused her of being pregnant, sarcastically commenting on her stomach size. Sylvia, thinking Gertrude was joking, said she would go on a diet. Gertrude then claimed that any girl who did something with a boy would have a baby before kicking Sylvia into the genitals. Paula, jealous of Sylvia's appearance, joined the attack, knocking her to the floor and yelling, "You ain't fit to sit in a chair!" During one meal, Gertrude, Paula, and a neighborhood boy, Randy Lepper, forced Sylvia to eat a hot dog overloaded with condiments. When Sylvia vomited, they even made her eat the vomit. In retaliation, Sylvia spread a rumor at school that Paula and Stephanie Baniszewski were prostitutes. Stephanie confronted Sylvia, who admitted to it and even apologized for that. Despite this, Stephanie's boyfriend, Coy Hubbard, brutally attacked Sylvia, slamming her head against the wall. Gertrude, too, then beat Sylvia with a paddle. Paula later beat Sylvia so severely that she broke her wrist, continuing to hit Sylvia with the cast. Gertrude falsely accused Sylvia of being promiscuous and a prostitute, and sometimes forced Jenny to hit Sylvia under threat of punishment if she refused. Gertrude even banned Sylvia from attending school after she admitted to stealing a gym suit because Gertrude refused to buy it for her. In response, Gertrude whipped Sylvia with a police belt and lectured her about the evils of premarital sex before kicking her in the genitals. Despite Stephanie's protests, Gertrude burned Sylvia's fingertips with matches and continued whipping her. A few days later, Gertrude whipped Jenny with the same belt after she reportedly stole a tennis shoe from the school. The Likens sisters were too afraid to tell anyone about the worsening abuse, fearing it would make things worse. Jenny especially was threatened by Gertrude, who promised to subject her to the same torture as Sylvia if she spoke up. Jenny was also bullied and bitten by neighborhood girls when she hinted at Sylvia's situation. Lester and Elizabeth Likens occasionally visited their daughters in Indianapolis during July and August. Their final visit was on October 5, but the girls showed no signs of distress in front of their parents, likely because Gertrude and her children were present. After their parents left, Gertrude taunted Sylvia, saying, "What are you going to do now? They are gone." In September, the girls met their older sister, Diana Shoemaker, at a park and told her about the abuse, especially Sylvia's targeting. However, they didn't give her their address, and Diana initially thought that they were exaggerating. Several weeks earlier, Sylvia and Jenny met their older sister Diana in a park while with 11-year-old Mary Beniszewski. Diana gave Sylvia a sandwich when she mentioned being hungry, although Sylvia stayed quiet about this. But Mary told her family in late September about this incident. In response, Gertrude accused Sylvia of gluttony, and she and Paula choked and beat her. They then forced Sylvia into a hot bath to cleanse her of sin, with Gertrude repeatedly banging her head against the tub to revive her when she was fainting. Shortly after, a neighbor's father called Arsenal Technical High School to anonymously report that a girl with open sores was living at the Baniszewski home. When a school nurse visited, Gertrude claimed Sylvia had run away the week before and that her sores were due to poor hygiene. She also said Sylvia was a bad influence. The school took no further action. The Banishewski's neighbors, Raymond and Phyllis Vermillion, visited twice and saw Paula physically abuse Sylvia, who had black eyes both times. Despite witnessing the mistreatment, they never reported it. Around October 1, Sylvia's older sister Diana discovered the girls were staying at the Banishewski home. She tried to visit, but Gertrude refused entry, claiming she had permission from their parents. 2 weeks later, Diana saw Jenny, who told her, "I can't tell you or I will get in trouble." As the abuse worsened, Sylvia lost control of her bladder and was forced to wet herself since she was denied bathroom access. On October 6th, Gertrude threw her into the basement as punishment, where she was often kept naked, barely fed, and deprived of water. She was sometimes tied to the basement stairs, her feet barely touching the ground. In the weeks leading up to this, Gertrude had increasingly tormented Sylvia, often lying to the children by claiming Sylvia had insulted them, encouraging further abuse. On one occasion, Gertrude held up a knife and taunted Sylvia to fight her back. Sylvia replied that she didn't know how to fight, and in response, Gertrude made a shallow cut on her leg. The physical and mental abuse would sometimes pause when Banishewskis watched TV. Neighborhood children were even charged 5 cents to watch, humiliate, beat, burn, and severely hurt Sylvia. While she was kept in the basement, Gertrude, her children, and the local kids frequently tied up and silenced Sylvia, forcing her into extremely hot baths and rubbing salt into her wounds. On one occasion, Gertrude and her 12-year-old son, John, smeared feces from a diaper into Sylvia's mouth and gave her a small amount of water, telling her that it was all she would get for the day. Can you imagine the height of atrocity that she was facing at this moment? On October 22nd, John Banishewski tormented Sylvia by teasing her with a bowl of soup, quickly taking it away when she tried to eat. Gertrude eventually let Sylvia sleep upstairs but insisted she learn not to wet herself. That night, Sylvia whispered to Jenny to secretly give her a glass of water before falling asleep because she was so damn thirsty. The next morning, Gertrude found that Sylvia had urinated on herself. As a punishment, Likens was forced to insert an empty glass of Coca-Cola bottle into her in the presence of the Banishewski children before Gertrude ordered her back into the basement. Not long afterward, Gertrude yelled at Likens to come back to the kitchen. "Now what you are going to listen is going to make your blood run cold." She then gave her the order to undress and proclaimed, "You have branded my daughters. Now I'm going to brand you." Using a hot needle, she started etching the words, "I am a prostitute and proud of it," onto Likens' stomach. Gertrude couldn't complete the branding, so she sent 14-year-old Richard Dean Hobbs, one of the local kids there, to finish engraving the words into Likens' skin while she drove Jenny to the grocery store. Likens gritted her teeth and groaned as Hobbs proceeded to brand the text into her belly. After leading Likens into the basement, Hobbs and 10-year-old Shirley Banishewski each tried to burn the letter S beneath Likens' left breast with an anchor bolt, but they only placed one portion of the loop backwards. Thus, this deep burn scar would have resembled the number 3. Gertrude taunted Sylvia, saying that she would never marry because of the words carved into her stomach, asking, "What are you going to do now?" Weeping, Sylvia replied, "I guess there's nothing I can do." That day, Gertrude forced Sylvia to show the carving to neighborhood children, claiming she got it at a party. That night, Sylvia said to her sister Jenny, "I know you don't want me to die, but I'm going to. I can tell it." The next day, Gertrude woke Sylvia and forced her to write a letter under her direction, intending to mislead their parents into believing Sylvia had run away. The letter framed a group of local boys for abusing and torturing Sylvia after she had consented to sexual relations with them. Afterward, Gertrude planned for John and Jenny to blindfold Sylvia and leave her in a wooden area known as Jimmy's Forest to die. Once Sylvia finished the letter, she was tied to the stair railing and offered crackers, which she refused, saying, "Give it to the dog. I don't want it." Gertrude then forced the crackers into Sylvia's mouth before she and John beat her, especially around the stomach. By the morning of October 26th, Sylvia could neither speak clearly nor control her limbs. Gertrude moved her to the kitchen, propped her against a wall, and tried to feed her a donut and milk. When Sylvia couldn't lift the glass, Gertrude threw her to the floor in frustration and sent her back to the basement. Soon after, Sylvia became delirious, moaning and mumbling. When Paula asked her to recite the alphabet, Sylvia could only manage the first 4 letters and couldn't get up. Paula threatened her and Gertrude ordered Sylvia, who had soiled herself, to clean up. That afternoon, some of the Sylvia's tormentors gathered in the basement. She tried to point out familiar faces, mumbling their names, but Gertrude yelled at her to be quiet. Sylvia attempted to bite into a rotten pear but failed, commenting on the looseness of her teeth. Jenny reminded her that her front tooth had been knocked out when she was 7 before leaving to do gardening work for the neighbors. Later, John Baniszewski laughed as he sprayed Sylvia with a garden hose. She tried to escape the basement but collapsed before reaching the stairs. In response, Gertrude stomped on her head before staring at her. Around 5:30 p.m., Richard Hobbs returned to the house and went to the basement, where he saw Stephanie crying and holding Sylvia's frail body after being told to clean her. Stephanie and Richard decided to give Sylvia a warm, soapy bath and dress her in new clothes, laying her on a mattress in one of the bedrooms. Sylvia weakly wished her daddy was here and that Stephanie would take her home. When Stephanie realized Sylvia wasn't breathing, she tried mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, while Gertrude yelled that Sylvia was faking her death. Sylvia was just 16 when she finally died from her injuries. By October 26, 1965, Sylvia Likens had died from a brain hemorrhage, shock, and malnutrition after enduring 3 months of continuous torture and starvation. She could no longer speak clearly or move properly. The results of her shocking autopsy revealed over 150 separate strikes against her body. They included burns, muscle damage, nerve damage, a swollen cavity, fingernails broken backwards, and she had reportedly bitten through her lips. When police arrived, Gertrude Baniszewski stuck to her story, claiming boys in the woods had beaten Sylvia and carved writings on her body. Jenny seized the opportunity to whisper to a police officer, "Get me out of here and I will tell you everything." Gertrude, Paula, Stephanie, and John Baniszewski, along with Richard Hobbs and Coy Hubbard, were arrested for murder. On May 19th, 1966, Gertrude was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison, though she avoided the death penalty. Paula was convicted of second-degree murder. But the shocking part is, even after committing such a heinous crime and despite so many protests, Gertrude was released on the parole for good behavior on December 4, 1985. I don't know what kind of good behavior can be more appealing than murdering and abusing a 16-year-old girl. Sylvia's tragic death shocked an entire state and community into recognizing the horrors of child abuse in a way no case had ever before. So what do you think? Did Sylvia really get justice? Those criminals who abused her to death were set free and they lived a normal life for the rest of their life? And what about the careless neighbors who, despite suspecting such occurrences, did not care to report it? I am truly shaken by this case. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments. With that, I end today's video. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and throw your comments below. And share this video if you really got shocked by this height of crime.